Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Owning Up podcast, where we discuss military spouse life, share resources and information for military spouses who want to start a business or who are currently navigating their business. I'm really excited to have and to relaunch our guests coming on our shows this season. And today I'm excited to have a very special guest. This is perfect timing, especially into the new year, as many of us are making goals and desires and what we want out of the year. So we have a special guest, Cheri Mason, coming on board. She is going to be coming on and talking about so many different intricate aspects of her life and her journey as a military spouse and business professional. She is a speaker. She is a coach. She is so many different things in our community, and she's an advocate. Join me today as we talk to Cheri Mason, who built her distinguished career over a lifetime of making positive impacts routinely and persevering through adversity. We'll discover what keeps her going and how you can too. We are going to be talking about her journey amidst a picturesque foothills of the Appalachia in small industrial town of Portsmouth, Ohio. Cheryl learned early on that life's challenges present opportunities to overcome difficulties and impact others. Undeterred by countless rejections from Nebraska to Germany and ultimately DC, Cheri persevered and defied all odds to become the first woman and military spouse chairman of the VA Board of Veterans Appeals. Through her genuine relationship leadership style, Cheri not only supported and nurtured her team, but also spearheaded innovative change. Her unwavering dedication transformed a struggling federal agency into a highly functioning organization, bringing tangible results to veterans and fostering increased trust and morale amongst her employees. As a speaker and author, she inspires and encourages people through her fierce perseverance and caring leadership style in overcoming obstacles. Her story stands in a testament to resilience and the profound impact one can make on others. In her up-and-coming book, Dare to Relate, Leading with a Fierce Heart, she unveils how her journey as a military spouse uniquely empowered her to embrace her unconventional leadership. So I'm so excited to bring her on board and have more conversations with you. Welcome to the show, Cheri.
Hi, Moni. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too. I'm so excited that you're our first guest of this year, as I feel like we've been meeting each other over the last year, like 2 or 3 times, just kind of popping in, having conversation, learning more about each other's journey. It's been really cool. Last time when we met in DC and you're like, I have my book, I'm writing a book. And I was so thrilled to hear that. So now we get to actually have a conversation. And that is what makes these relationships and these networking events so special and unique, because our listeners have so much to learn from you. And I'm just excited to dive in. So before we dive completely in, I want you to tell us a little bit more. I know I read all of your high level accolades, but tell us a little bit about maybe where you are and your military spouse journey.
Well, thank you. And yeah, you covered a lot. So I think you've got it. Well, I retired from the VA almost a year ago this month. And, wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but, wanted to continue with purpose, impact, value, because that's who I am. And I am now, my husband's retired, so I'm a veteran spouse as well. And we relocated. We moved down to the Pinehurst, North Carolina area. And so I'm about 30 minutes from Fort Liberty. A very strong military and veteran community, very supportive, and lots of military spouses and veteran spouses around. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm involved in the community. I do some speaking here and there and, like some consulting, but that's pretty much what I'm doing. I've spent most of really the last 3 to 4 months seriously hidden in the book, finishing it up.
Yes, and we were just talking about that, and you gave us a little update. So the book should be out by the time maybe this podcast comes out. Or soon.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So today, when I was reading over your bio and everything that you did, and as number one, as a military spouse, and number two, as a woman, there are so many things and barriers and glass ceilings that you broke. But I want to talk about overcoming imposter syndrome. So this is, listeners, if you guys are struggling with any kind of feelings of self-doubt or imposter syndrome, and you feel like you're losing the battle, today we are going to talk to Cheri about that. So as a military spouse, we are constantly starting over.
Mm-hmm.
We have, I would say, our number one barrier is imposter syndrome and that insecurity of feeling that our history and where we are in our journey of maybe not having that career or that full-time job or building a very profitable business or successful business, it gets in the way of us kind of going forward. What do you think are some ways? I mean, just as humans, we struggle with imposter syndrome. And, when I first started my business, I had no idea what this feeling was. I literally would start getting nervous about meeting with a client or speaking at a workshop. And I didn't realize what it was until I was trying to figure out, like, doing therapy, like why these things are happening, why these feelings of insecurity are happening to me when I know that I'm so talented. So we all have to work on that. Everybody has to work on that. So what are some things, as you're advising military spouses, and our audience is military spouses who've either thinking about starting a business or who have a business, what are some ways that you would suggest to them to really help build their self-confidence and overcome that?
Well, I think, the first lesson on imposter syndrome, and, I have definitely battled it. I battled it starting to write the book. It's an overcoming, but it's more about managing it, because the gremlins are there. I don't name them, but they're little voices. They're little gremlins that sit on your shoulder and say, you can't do this. You don't know what you're doing, all that stuff. Right. But I think one of the amazing things about military spouses that I learned on my journey, and I learned from other military spouses, and I look back and I see it really, really well in hindsight, is that military spouses, because of the barriers and the challenges we have from moving and relocating and managing different schedules, deployments, TDYs, life, all the things, we actually are, because we're surviving through that, right? Because we are surviving. As we survive, we build our resilience. We create within that the ability to overcome that and manage those imposter syndrome, because we've done it. When I quote, Eleanor Roosevelt in the book, and I won't get the quote exactly right because I don't have it in front of me, but basically she's like, the biggest thing we can do is face our fears and say, look, I've overcome it. I've done it. Let's go on to the next thing. And I think that's something that military spouses, especially today, because the world has changed so much. We learned through COVID and the shutdown and the reopening and the restructuring and redefining things, that what military spouses really bring to the table is that ability to be agile and flexible and adapt and look at things differently. And quite frankly, that's where organizations and businesses today that's what they're looking for. And that's what the newest generation of workers entering the workforce is bringing. Because, I recently was speaking with someone and they said, yeah, when you get to your 40s and 50s, you want to think about purpose, impact, and value. And I'm like, absolutely. That's kind of how we were trained in our world, right? You work and then you think about it. The millennials and Gen Zs are already thinking about purpose, impact, and value. And that's where the military spouses of today can really come in and say, hey, I'm here. I do it. So it's just a situation of saying, I can, and encouraging yourself.
And how do you think, like, a lot of spouses, we hear all these different types of terms. Is there anything specifically that you do for yourself? Any affirmations, any kind of like, we have I've heard some crazy things. How do you kind of coach yourself through that when you're feeling that little gremlin on your shoulder? What are some things that you do for yourself?
Well, imposter syndrome is really grounded in our fears. That's where it's based in. It's in our fears. And I was a psychology and a political science student in college. And so I really learned in college that, positive self-talk, your attitude, and sometimes your posture, your positioning. There's been several studies out about, the Wonder Woman pose and things like that. But it really is about carrying yourself in a certain way, believing you can, and then telling yourself that you can.
Yeah. And I know that is one of the biggest hurdles, like our members specifically, when we put out a survey or when we're having conversation, we give them all the tools and the resources, but it comes down to your self-talk, motivation, your self-worthiness. And a lot of that does come from just really practicing that every single day. In fact, one of the things I'm doing this year, I'm a big affirmations person. I'm doing a habit tracker. And habit tracker every day to remind myself of affirmations and just really things like that that can remind us. Because I think what is really powerful about what you said is that not only is there so much information out there that we have to empower ourselves to use that information. We cannot expect other people to do it for us.
Right.
So we have the tools out there. There's tons of blogs, there's tons of YouTube channels, there's tons of amazing books, but it's like being a student and studious of you making sure you're doing it for yourself. Because if you're not, you can be a great scholar, right? You can know all the great tools, but if you're not getting through those, it really is almost like you can't shine truly in who you are until you get through those barriers. Oh, it froze. Oh, is that can you hear me?
I think.
Okay, we're back. Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Woo!
Got a little
you guys. Sorry, guys. We're battling very bad weather here in Virginia and in North Carolina. But I go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that attitude and that, self-belief. But, I experienced imposter syndrome. I saw imposter syndrome in spades. And the one thing I will tell you, whether, no matter where you sit, because people lead from different places. You lead as a podcaster and what you do in business. You're a leader. People lead from all those positions. People will not follow because they can see imposter syndrome a mile away. They can spot it. And so you really have to portray that confidence in yourself. And that's a lot of the work you do as a leader, as you're figuring out who you are and what you want to do and how you figure those things out. That's part of the work you do to figure that out. And that's a self-awareness piece and a growth piece. And that's where the self-investment and where reading and getting coaching and mentoring all comes in.
Yeah. And that self-investment is huge. I talk about that all the time. Invest in yourself and advocate for yourself because nobody's going to do it, honey. If you're out here and you have a business and you're not talking about it, why would a sponsor give you money for it? Why would somebody hire you as an affiliate? But, you said a really good thing that one of the ways I've overcome a lot of imposter syndrome is making sure that I know my stuff in my area of expertise, right? So making sure that I know my audience, I know who I advocate for, and I can speak on it confidently. And I think when you narrow down, like you said, what is your leadership? What is your skill? And become very confident in that and not worry about doing everything. That is where that sweet spot comes in. And you're like, I got this because I know my stuff.
Right. That's right.
I love that. And, imposter syndrome, I'm sure played into a lot of the other things that we're going to talk about here in a minute. I want to dive into a new term that I was reading about when I was doing, research before I had you on the show, fostering trust up, down, and across. Could you share more about what that means?
So when you're a leader, and like I said, you lead from where you sit, one of the things you need to do is build relationships. And we are not, especially with the virtual world and with COVID, that has been harder. Right. It's been harder for those of us who were used to the in-person relationship, for the generation like my children, my two sons, who do a lot on their phones and on computers. And so building those relationships is key. And you don't just build, when you're a leader or an employee, you don't just build relationships alongside. You have to build relationships with everyone around you. And that includes your supervisors, that includes any employees that you have, and that includes your colleagues. And so the across, up, and down is really significant because those relationships are really what drives you. And that's, you're investing in people, showing
Mm,
people that you care and building that. But that builds trust. So, as in the position I was in as a leader, I had to build relationships with the people who worked for me, right? I had to build relationships with my colleagues who, who were the other principals in the department, um, and the secretary, but also I had to build relationships with my customers and my
mhm,
stakeholders, which included Congress
mhm.
and a lot of veteran service organizations. And so, thinking about how you do that and how you engage with people, it really comes down to the fact that we're all human beings. And
Mm,
every one of us, no matter what generation we're in, we all want to matter. We all want to have purpose, to have impact, and to bring value. That's what we're about. And so by doing that, and by engaging with people and listening and valuing others, you build those relationships and those trust.
yeah, and one of the things that I really value here at AMC is like I want spouses to feel seen,
Hmm.
and that is because it's been a while since I actually worked for somebody. Like it's been a while. I threw that towel in almost 10 years ago. I was like, forget this. I gotta figure this out as a military spouse.
Yeah.
But you have to. People want to feel seen, and when
Right.
people feel seen, they share ideas. They
Hmm.
make connections, they make introductions. And so,
Hmm.
as a leader, whether you're a leader in business, and that's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about really quick. When we talk about leaders, a lot of times people think you have to be outspoken or on social media or all these different things. But leaders come in all shapes and forms, right?
They
And
do.
they can show up in any way. Like, so, when we talk to spouses that are introverts and they have a brand, they're like, oh, well, I'm not a leader. I can't do this and that. And it's like, no, everybody leads in their own area of
Hmm.
expertise. And when you are leading, like you said, you have to do it from the top up, all around and below, everybody around you, because you never know how one piece can fit and fix a puzzle completely by somebody's opinion, information, or even an attitude, right? Like as a team member. So, as a leader, tell us about maybe something, a tip that you can give one of our spouses when it comes to leading as a business owner, maybe something that they could embrace and move forward. And a lot of our spouses are not necessarily leading big teams, and implementing advocacy and change, but they are leading in their customer journey or in their thought leadership.
Yes. So I think, and people never believe this when I tell them this, but I am an introvert. And people are like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. But I had to learn in various leadership roles how to embrace the extrovert side and engage. And I think the most important thing you can do as a business leader, as a leader, as wherever you sit, and you mentioned it before, is be visible and be engaged.
Mm,
Because if you are out engaging and being visible, whether it's with the people who work for you, whether it's online, whether it's even social media, you have the opportunity to do that. That sends a signal and conveys really something about you, that
mm,
you're present and that you're involved and that you care. Because like you said, people want to be seen. They want to be seen and they want to be heard, but they also want to know that you care about them.
yeah. Yeah, that's so important. And a person like my team is all virtual, and
Mhm.
it's so important. Like some of my team I've never met in person.
Mhm.
Um, but there are so many great ways that you can help people that are around you feel seen and
Mhm.
feel important and valued. And I really love that. And we do that all the time here at AMC because, and our members, I feel like I work with our members here at AMC, even though they're like business owners in our program. I definitely always want to encourage that. And I encourage our community because I've even had spouses say, oh, I just started my business. What do I know? Honey, you have an e-commerce site. There's so much you can teach somebody else that maybe who wants to do it. So if you're
Yep.
listening to this, This is your call to action, that if there's an imposter, honey, if you're an introvert, Cheri is saying you need to go for it, right? You need to just go for it.
Yeah, because people are gonna tell you no, and they're gonna put you in the box. And people tried to put me in a box from the age of 4 on, when I lost my father to suicide, and they, oh, sweetheart, you're, you don't have to, whatever. And then, as a military spouse, it wasn't acceptable to work and have a career. And I just, I said, I'm not accepting the box. I call it in the book a cloak of invisibility. And I use that theme throughout the book for different things. But the cloak of invisibility, you can hide in it. You absolutely can hide in it. But if you're a leader and you're hiding, you are impacting much more than you realize.
Yeah. There's so much power in what you said. And I feel like it is, you're absolutely right. It is a invisibility, and it's almost complacency. It's insecurity. And I haven't read your book yet because it's not out yet, but I'm picking up all these things that you're dropping, girlfriend. I am picking them up.
You're picking them up.
They're so powerful. And when we talk about that in the landscape of military spouses, and you're saying like people trying to put you in a box, right? It is so much it was so much part of our culture that military spouses, and this is our history, we all know it if you're listening, we are there for the military member.
Of course.
We are there to support them. And that really should be what your beck and call is. And Cheri's here to say, honey, it don't need to be that way. And I'm proof that it's doable, right? Yes. And so with our current social media information out there, you're right. The entire forecast and the way that our modern military spouses are seeing leaders like you, seeing other military spouses say, go for it, do it. Don't wait for retirement. Don't wait for your next TDY. Don't wait for the next deployment. Don't wait for the next baby. Just go for it. And I'm here to tell you how. So as a woman and military spouse, that is a huge glass ceiling that you broke through as the CEO chairman of the board of Veterans Appeals at the VA Veterans. That's a mouthful. Tell us more about your role, because this is a very, very important role, not only in our community, but in our nation, and led by a woman. On top of that, a military spouse. I mean, when you talk about going against the grain and not putting you in a box, you did all of the things. So, tell us more about your role there. And then I want to jump into any advice you have for spouses who are looking to break glass ceilings on top of that.
Sure. So the board is kind of an enigma itself anyway within the department, because most people don't really realize what the board does and how it impacts. So the board is the secretary's designee to decide appeals from across the department, which means the board sees appeals, from claims from Veterans Benefits Administration, which includes disability compensation, education, home loan, insurance, every business line they have. Then we go to Veterans Health Administration. The board also sees appeals from claims in that area. The newest one is, of course, caregiver, which is a big area. And then there's a few from the cemetery administration. That's a smaller area. It's a smaller organization. In fact, the board and cemetery administration are almost the same size. And then there's a few things that come up to the board from general counsel, because they're the lawyers for the VA, but we're the appellate lawyers, the secretary's designees. So that's really what the responsibility is. The board currently has, I think, about 1,300 people. When I started as chairman, we had about 800. I grew that to 1,200. And I brought on 65 to 70 more judges. I'm not sure exactly, because several of them came in after I left, because we were waiting for White House approval, because the judges have to be approved by the White House because they are the secretary's designee. They act in the secretary's shoes. So really the case law, is a mile wide and a mile deep, because you're going into medical stuff, you're going into, educational. It's really, there's a lot. And so on top of that, the chairman is also the principal advisor to the secretary on everything appeals and other things. So under my responsibility, we were implementing appeals modernization. We're actually writing the regulations and implementing that new area. And so I had the responsibility for drawing down appeals for the old system, which we referred to legacy, and launching the new system while I was chairman. So we went from 500,000 legacy appeals to 96,000 while I was chairman. And in that time, we also innovated with technology because there hadn't been an investment in the board before ever. And we, but I led differently. When I was unique in that I came out of the board itself. Most times as a careerist, I had worked at the board for several years, almost 20 plus 22 years. And I had, climbed the ladder of leadership and I was a senior executive. But the White House called and said, will you serve as chairman? And, after I got up off the floor,
you're like, pitch me. Wait a minute. Is this a real call?
Right. And I said, yes, if I can make it through Senate confirmation, because Senate confirmation. Yeah. And they said, you'll be fine. And I said, oh, and by the way, I do not lead conventionally. I will lead unconventionally. And they said, that's why we're calling you. And so, that's what happened. And so there's the board does, the time I was there, we were doing about 100,000 decisions a year. Which was up when I took the position. The most we'd ever done was like 55,000, and we also, with technology and virtual telehearings, doubled the number of hearings offered. And I empowered the board to go fully remote. I was already doing that with part of our workforce, which included several military spouses, but the entire workforce had the opportunity to go remote. So we transitioned from about a 60% in-person space during COVID to almost fully remote, and then learning how to engage with people virtually versus, walking around the building, which I did both, because that's what you have to do. So that's a little bit about the board and what we do. Hopefully.
Wow, that is, listen, I feel like I feel like it could be a whole podcast just about the board and what they do. I mean, the work you're talking about is so much, it's so needed, and we need leadership like you. So when you're talking about unconventional leadership, when you told them that, what did you mean by that, and how were you looking to change and make impact?
Yeah. Well, because I had been at the board for a while, and I had watched and struggled through various leaders. I really felt that leaders did not support or engage the employees. I didn't feel engaged. I didn't feel supported. And I knew that the employees who worked for me did not. And so I led by taking care of my people. So from day one, my swearing in, I'm like, look, we're going to communicate. We're going to engage. I'm going to be visible. We're going to talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I want to hear ideas. I want to hear suggestions. I want to be open, to what's going on. This is your organization. This is not my organization. I'm just the conduit. I'm the leader to support, fight for you. But you guys are here to go do. And that was really my focus, because we all knew that we had a serious job, that the VA's mission is to care for the veteran and their families, and the board does that. I mean, what the board does is provide, make those decisions so veterans can get benefits and services they earned. Yeah. And that's huge because it impacts their entire livelihood.
Yeah. I'm really, what you said just really makes me think about how leaders like you do need to be in positions like that to really implement change, because it trickles down from the veteran to the spouse to the children.
Absolutely.
And so I just want to say, it's so good to hear you say that and say, like, I'm going against the grain. We're not going to put me in a box. I'm going to overcome this imposter syndrome. Like, you're doing so many things that I know so many spouses in our community are listening. They're like, I want to do that. I want to get there. So when you're talking about leadership, let's talk about the book, Dare to Relate, Leading with a Fierce Heart,
Okay.
which is not released yet. So this is, you guys, if you're listening to this, go buy it. If it's after March or April, go buy it. But I'm on the edge of my seat wanting to learn more about it. And I feel like you have shared some things that you're going to talk about in there. But what led you to write this book?
Well, so I'm going to follow up the previous conversation, and then I will go into that because they kind of tie in. So as a woman as the first woman stepping into this position, and as a careerist, I had a lot of people who did not believe I would succeed, and who literally were betting against me, inside and externally. And so, just that goes with the territory, right?
Yeah.
But I knew that, and because if I didn't, they told me. But but that when I got ready to retire from VA, I got a lot of people asking me, what are you going to do? What's going to happen now? You're going to retire and just go enjoy yourself? And I'm like, have you met me? Look, I'm a military spouse, full through. I learned from great military spouses and veteran spouses who are still dear friends. Just because you transition, you just pivot, right? You keep going because that's who we are. And so I said, I'm going to pivot, but I don't know to what. And so a couple of friends and someone I was on a podcast with suggested that I write a book. And my husband had been on me to write a book for a while. I'm like, I don't know anything about writing a book. I don't know. So as I started listening and engaging with people, reading social media, it moved from the book that people told me I had to write to the book that I needed to write.
Yeah.
And the reason is because what I heard from people I engaged with, people I consulted with, people who were friends of my sons, there is a lack of ability and understanding in leaders about how to engage with their employees and take care of their employees. They just don't, they're still in the mindset that I'm in this position, I know best, and I'm here to say this is how we're going to do it, and you're going to ask me how high I'm supposed to jump. That's not going to work, and it's not working, and we're continuing to see that. And people, we see a lot of mental health challenges. We see some anxiety with, around everything that's happening. The world we live in comes at us at full force all the time. And, leaders have to understand that people do not check themselves at the door. So, one of the things I say in the book is when I became chairman, my life with two children, one was in college, one was in high school, a husband who worked full time, my mom, who was had late stage Alzheimer's, and a couple of dogs. My life didn't stop because I pulled into the parking garage. Like I didn't, just leave everything at the door. My life continued, and I couldn't expect the people who worked for me to their lives to stop either. And so I wanted to know kind of what was going on in their worlds, how to support them. No, we're not going to go out and have beers together and, go to the movies, but you still need to engage. You still need to know what's going on, because you can't support them if you don't know how to do that. And if you don't know what they're worried about, what keeps them up at night, things like that. So that's really what the book talks about. I start kind of at the early period of my life when I lost my father to suicide at age 4. He was a World War II veteran. I lost my brother at age 17. He had served. He was actually at boot camp when my father died, and he died 13 years after my father, leaving a family behind. And the impact of those, and how I was treated, and treated like I was invisible and not seen. And then jumping into military spouse world and not knowing anything about that, and kind of having a similar responses taught me so much. But, it was really the military spouses who came alongside, supported, and taught me, that we learned and encouraged each other. And throughout my journey, really showed me how relationships and leadership work together and matter. And, then when I had the opportunity to step into leadership, like I said, I did it unconventionally, and I did it successfully. The board flourished the 5 years that I was the chairman. And we made huge impacts in veterans' lives, which that's the most important thing. And so that's what I talk about in the book, is how I kind of went through that journey. Things that you need to think about, like we've talked about, figuring out who you are, finding your leadership path, some ideas about how to do that, some topics about, I have a leadership toolbox chapter. And my dad was a carpenter, so those tools are important. And things like that you can actually use as a leader and employ, from wherever you sit.
And I feel like even when you're talking, even as a leader and your employee, I feel like spouses can also use it as they're running their business. Absolutely. You said something I want to go back to. I want to just say high five to your spouse for being so supportive and encouraging you to write this book. And I feel like, and I don't know if you feel like this, sometimes people see things in us before we see them in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And it's so powerful. I feel like a lot of times we just kind of like brush it off, and that comes to back to that imposter of, oh no, I don't have a story to share. Nobody would listen. It's too hard, like all these different things. So I just want to say high five to a supportive spouse and all the supportive spouses out there. And when you talked about your leadership toolbox, what is one tool that you could share with us today that we could put in our box?
Visibility. I talked about that before, being visible, being engaged. But when you do that, listening, and that means closing your mouth and opening your ears and turning off your brain.
That is really powerful. And I know that when you were talking a minute ago, you mentioned, really, to me, what you're saying is just really lead from the heart. You're human as a leader. And when we have leaders, sometimes they feel like we put them on this type of pedestal, like they can't make mistakes, they're perfect. And I feel like sometimes it's a two-way street. Like we have to show as leaders, I screwed up. I've said that so many times to my team, guys, that was me that sent the email from the wrong user. My bad, like that was me. And so when your team makes the mistake, or your employee makes the mistake, or whatever, they can feel like, hey, it's human and I'm all good. Also, when you lead that way, it opens up conversation for ways to make improvements or ideas that maybe you would have never heard of. So I love that. And I can't wait to read your book. I'm really excited about it.
Being vulnerable. I mean, Brene Brown talks about this really in depth, and her book's amazing. And I do quote her in my book, but that vulnerability piece is so important, because when you're vulnerable, you're really, opening yourself up, and you do make mistakes, and leaders learn more from their mistakes. But what I really felt, and that's where the second part of the title comes from in the book, is I learned to lead with my heart first.
Yeah.
And I've been called fierce. I've been called intense. I picked up the fierce picked up the fierce thing for that, because I think, to be a leader, regardless of where you sit, whatever you're doing. And I think I learned this actually from military spouses. So I owe this to military spouses. You have to be fierce about it. And, you fiercely follow your heart, because that's the best way to lead. And it's the best way to engage with people.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. This has been such a great conversation with you. We've learned so much, not only about your background and who you are, but we've learned about your journey and how you've owned all of those little pieces, all of those doubts, all of those things, and you've created this amazing story. So I know that our listeners today are encouraged and motivated to go after it. Before we close out, tell me where we can find you, and how we can support you on your journey.
Thank you. So you can always follow me on LinkedIn. It's Cheri Mason. There's probably a parens Cheryl there because I kind of have two names, but I do go by Cheri. The pen name and the official name is Cheryl. But you can follow me on LinkedIn. And then I do have a website. It's www.catalystleadershipmgmt.com. And you can find everything about my speaking, consulting, and the book on there. And as it stands right now, the book is fingers crossed on slated to come out March timeframe, late March timeframe. But I do have a TED Talk that is TEDx, actually, that's supposed to be released in early February, fingers crossed. So you can also check that out, and I'll let people know. So if you follow me on LinkedIn or you check my website, you'll see either of them there.
What's your TED Talk about? Your TEDx? Is it TEDx or TED Talk? I feel like I just messed
it. It's a TEDx. It's a TEDx through VA. But they're going to release it publicly. So we'll see. But the TED Talk the title of the TED Talk is The Secret Ingredient to Leadership.
I love that. I love that. And if you're a military spouse and you're listening here, we hope that you've decided to embrace your leadership, crush that gremlin, and go after all of those and bust through those glass ceilings, because Cheri's done it. And there are so many spouses out there doing it. And we're here to embrace you and support you in our AMC community. Thank you so much for being here with me today and spending time to share your journey and be just very authentic and transparent, because that's really what we need, especially in our military spouse community.
Well, thank you for doing what you do, Moni. I can't, you are amazing. I'm a fangirl. So keep doing it.
Each other.
Keep doing it. Keep making a difference. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Together we can do so much. So you guys listening out there, find your people to surround yourself with and do things together. Really, that's the only way to elevate and reach and advocate and just do more. We could never alone reach as many spouses that we could together. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for being here today. And if you are listening, make sure that you head over and you follow Cheri, you connect with her, stay tuned, subscribe to her email. We'll be dropping all of her information in our show notes, and we will see you guys inside the AMC community. Okay.